So you see that gap between where you are right now and where you want to be. And how can you possibly close that gap, right? How do we come up with a plan that not only does exactly that, closes that gap, but also feels good along the way? Welcome, everyone. I'm Sharri Harmel, your host for the Extraordinary Women podcast show, and I am so happy that you have joined me today. Well, we are going to dive into step number 4 of the 7-step framework from my upcoming book, Designing Your Fabulous Next Chapter. This step is truly all about creating a plan to close that gap between where you are and where you want to be, and start living, right? Living your next chapter, feeling the way that you want to feel. Let's do just a quick review of each step. And if there are a few of you who are on audio only, I would highly recommend that at some point you get onto YouTube, subscribe so that you get notifications of all of this and watch the actual podcast show, because I think you'll get a whole lot more information that you need in order to get started on your own plan. So anyways, join us. So step 1 is all about, or was, I should say, all about letting yourself dream. And I'm going to give you a screen share here. And let's see how that works. Always a big question, right? And here we go. So step 1 was, like I said, let yourself dream and dream big. Why not? Your next chapter is, like that point in your life, not unlike when you were 18 years old and you had graduated from high school and you were trying to think of, what do I want to do next? What college do I want to go to? What do I want to major in? I think this chapter of our life is not a whole lot different than that. The world is our oyster, so to speak. We can go anywhere. We can have all kinds of different ideas. So that first step, and I'm giving you an idea. This was an example of someone who's a professional, but here's my actual mind map. And you could see it's disorganized and it's crazy. And that is totally okay, because this step number 1, was all about dream dump, as I call it, coming up with everything that you could possibly come up with that may potentially be part of your next chapter dream. Now you see, I have some different colors in there, and that relates to my vision board, which I didn't know when I actually did this step. So in step number 2, you get to the point where you're starting to prioritize everything you came up with, that dream dump, everything that you came up in that particular step. Now, step number 2 is, what's important to me? What's my list of priorities? And just so that you know, for those of you who are who have signed up for the wait list for the book, will actually get access to the card sort very soon. We're working on creating it so that you can download it and do it from your home. But in the meantime, listen to step number 2, because I really talk about going through that process of taking all those ideas that show up on your brain dump, your dream dump, so to speak, and then turning them into a priority chart, if you want to call it that, priority list, and then turning around and using those priorities to create your vision board. This is mine. It's actually behind me. But you can see that there's 4 different sections that I chose to put on my vision board. Don't go any more than 4. And again, if you don't happen to go back and look at the vision board step number 2 process, you can see that nowhere on here is my own handwriting. And there's a reason for that. So go listen to step 2 and you'll find out what that reason is. So my 4 categories were travel, my career calling, so to speak, and my home and environment, and the search for joy, or love and relationships. Now, in step number 3, which is what we did last week, I called it an honesty party. an honesty party with ourselves. And it's really I took the 4 categories from my vision board: travel, career, home, dating. And, obviously you want them to all be 10s, right? Otherwise they would not show up in your top priorities in your next chapter goals. And then I had to have what I call an honesty party of where am I on those 4 different categories. And you can see, career, I gave myself a 5. Dating, love, I gave myself a 1. Home, I gave myself a 6. And travel, I gave myself an 8. I live in Paris pretty much half the year. And so consequently, my travel is pretty high. It's important to me, but it's also very high. And therefore, there's not as much of a gap with travel in comparison to dating and love, if you want to look at it from that perspective. Anyways, how to go through the gap? We did it in step number 3. It's really, I'm using just one of my categories to give you an example. I focused in first on how I want to feel in my next chapter. And you could see they're written like affirmations. They're all positive. They're all in the present tense. I am promoting my upcoming book. I am fit enough to travel. I do have a growing list of readers. I am making a difference in the world, because part of my next chapter career calling is that I really want to help women specifically who are 50 plus to really design and create amazing next chapters. It's not about the money. This is not something that's ever going to, provide great wealth for me. It's about making a difference. I want to share what I have learned with other women. I took how I want to feel, and then as you can tell back here, I gave myself a rating. And how I came up with that rating was really talking about, and I used my journal, which I highly recommend for all of you. Use your journals. Your journals will be powerful tools for you to go through this process. But really, where am I now? And I'm comparing how I want to feel with where I am now. And I started to see some interesting subcategories, if we want to call it that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I don't have regular scheduled writing sessions. My mindset is an issue because I have imposter syndrome. Who am I to write a book, right? Who am I to share my story? Exercise is important, because if I'm going to be fit enough to travel and do speaking engagements and, speaking gigs from time to time, I have to feel energized. I have to feel really good. So anyways, that's important. That was that process. And then the next step is really recognizing where you are right now and where it is that you want to go, and recognizing the difference in the middle, the gap in the middle. And that is what this particular step of, designing your next chapter is really, truly all about. Now, we're at that place. This is step number 4, where we're ready to come up with a plan to close that gap so that there isn't this huge difference between where I am right now and where it is I want to go. How do you come up with these ideas? And I'm going to give you some particular categories to focus in on, but how do you come up with these ideas? I think the space where you do go through this process is really important to you. It needs to be a space and a place where, you get inspiration. Maybe it's a cafe, maybe it's a library, somewhere where you can also focus in on yourself. I do some of my best work, as I've shared, on airplanes and in cafes. It's like there's enough background noise to kind of calm me down, settle my brain down, and then provide the focus of what it is that I want to work on. So think about that as you get yourself into a space where you're ready to do this step, which is coming up with a plan for closing that gap. They're dealing with the gap between where you are now and where you want to go. Also remember, what you eat or drink can make a difference. One doesn't want to have 2 glasses of champagne, as wonderful as that sounds, and sit down and try to do this. Or 4 cups of coffee, which is probably more my MO. Put on some music. Are there certain times of the day when you are more productive? When I did this and I sat down, it became really clear, that I needed to schedule in regular writing times. Now, remember, this is just mine. And it's based on my career plans, which is writing the book. And so it was scheduling in the time and holding that space as sacred. I have to ask Sarah Bees for progress on getting me a co-writing partner. I really have to work on mindset. I have to use my vision board, and that's all part of step 2. I have to use my vision board to believe every single day, because believing impacts, how I feel about the possibilities of this actually all coming true. I have to speak up. I have to talk about my book. I have to be willing to share with other people as though I'm at a book signing. Oh, yes, I'm writing about that in my book. Yes, and even asking questions. What does that mean? Oh, great. Where are you at with other women who are possibly in the same space or at this particular stage of their life? I have to decide on illustrations. What's going to go in the book? What kind of a book format do I want to have? All really, really important as in my case, I'm closing the gap between where I am and where I want to be on writing the book. But this just gives you an idea of that particular process. So let's go to you as an example. I want you to take your priorities from your vision board. I'm going to take yourself back to your vision board, because whatever you put on your vision board are the priorities, your top priorities in your next chapter. And yes, there are some subcategories that you might have come up with, but far and away, those top priorities that you will have done through the card sort and through your vision board work in step number 2 will actually determine where you start, because you're going to take your vision board, you're going to do exactly what I did, which is to rate yourself, and then start to create a list of what it is that you have to do. What changes do you have to make in your life in order for you to close that gap? And you might be sitting there going, Sharri, that's great, but where to look? Where do I begin? I have some specific examples for my own issues in the closing the gap in writing the book, but yours might be entirely different. Yours might not look like this. So Sharri, where are the first places to go to really explore how do I close that gap? The number 1 place for you to look is your habits. Truly, our habits are everything. And I swear to God, I can get a bad habit in a weekend. A good habit might take that 30 days that they talk about, but a bad habit, I got that. I'm a quick learner, so to speak, in the bad habit world. But our habits determine how we live our lives. Our habits determine, our schedule, our daily schedule. So I want you to look at your own schedule. Where do I spend my time? And in the book, actually, I take you through a whole process to do a time analysis. We've all done food logs. We might have done money logs and that sort of thing in order to really identify where we're spending our money, or what we're eating that's causing whatever it is that we're trying to solve. The same thing for your time. So in my book, I take you through the process of doing a time log to really get a close look at how you're spending your time. So it's very, very important for you to have an understanding of who am I spending my time with, where am I spending my time, and does that fit with where I want to be in my next chapter? That is one of the top ways to close the gap. between where you are and where you want to be is to adjust your schedule. You can spend an incredible amount of time with people who do not support your next chapter dreams, who are not, how do I say, positive about what it is that you want to achieve in your next chapter. We all have people we love who are naysayers. Sometimes they might be in our families. Sometimes they're just friends we've had for a very long time. So it's really an opportunity for you to ask yourself, are there people I need to spend less time with? Are there things I need to be doing that I'm not doing right now? Remember, I talked about having a specific writing schedule and honoring that schedule. So I want you to first start with your habits. The next area to focus in on to close that gap between where you are and where you want to go is your mindset. Mindset is huge, absolutely huge. And I know that that word mindset leads us all to think of all kinds of things. But it is incredibly important. And I actually am giving you a book suggestion in this particular area. It's written by Michael Hyatt and his daughter, Megan Hyatt Miller. And it's called Mind Your Mindset. I read this book on airplanes twice, going and coming to visit family. And I just made notes and notes and notes and notes because I found it one of the best, most applicable work that I've ever come across on mindset, something that I could turn around and really analyze. What am I doing to impact my mindset? And one of the things that I thought was super important, and I briefly mentioned that back when I was talking about where I'm now and where I want to be, is the stories that we create and write about ourselves. Those stories, whether they're positive or negative, will significantly impact whether or not you achieve your next chapter goals and also what kind of a life you live. Often the stories that we tell ourselves are negative. It's coming from maybe some of the things that we heard from bosses, the things we've heard from coworkers, the things we've heard from even family members. Those stories or those comments hang around in our heads, and suddenly we create a story around those comments. And the stories are often negative. And that is what stops most people from achieving what it is that they want to achieve, regardless of their particular age and stage in life. So it's something for you to really think about, because those stories that we tell ourselves are often dressed up as good advice. It was the advice that our fathers gave us, or the advice that our mothers gave us, or, something we heard on a regular basis. Could even be family nicknames. Sounds crazy, but sometimes those family nicknames are cruel. And so Mind Your Mindset, the book, really talked about, it's not the only thing they talked about, but there's a significant section in the book about the stories that we have created from our memories. And there's now conclusive evidence that our memories are not perfect. We actually often will remember and rewrite our past. And often that is what is part of the story we tell ourselves that creates roadblocks for ourselves, real speed bumps, if you want to call it, moving forward. You have to take, if you go through this book, and like I said, I highly recommend it, and I would love to have Michael or Megan be on one of these podcasts to talk about this. But you have to, when you read the book, take the time. Read the book when it's quiet, and you really have the time to connect to your feelings as you're going through this, because we all have that. I think most of us are the same. We've accomplished a lot. We've had a lot of experiences in our life where we think, oh gosh, I can do that. That phrase, I've got this, is a perfect example. We can get through anything, but the stories are still running in the background. And it's time to expose those stories, to open up those stories and rewrite them, because we wrote them. They're not reality. They're fiction, many of them. And therefore we can rewrite those stories. And that's another area to really look when you're trying to identify, where am I now? And how do I need to change in order to get to where it is that I want to go? You could see I put the book there, but I also put Paris, because sometimes places allow us to go to that place of seeing possibilities, whereas other places don't. Paris, for me, as I always shared, was a place of healing, and certainly was a place where I think that I learned how to create my next chapter. Paris enveloped me in love and support. And find your Paris, whatever that might be. It might just be a room in your house. It might be in your garden, but find that place that supports you so that you can connect into those stories that you've told yourself that are not empowering stories, that are actually sabotaging your next chapter dreams. I say read because I read an awful lot. This is just one book on mindset that I'm sharing with you. It's one of my favorites, but read whatever you can, because what reading does is it allows us to step into new ideas, new ways of thinking, new ways of being. And that is all positive as you are in the process of creating your next chapter. So habits, mindset, and the next one is just deal with the difficult. This is not going to be easy peasy. It really isn't. I was a direct coach in all my years of coaching. I was not someone that just said, write down some affirmations, say those things to yourself every day and your life will change. I don't think that's true. I think we have to recognize this is not going to be easy. Changing habits is not easy, and therefore acknowledge it. And by acknowledging it, now suddenly I can do it. Yes, this is hard, rather than saying to yourself, oh gosh, I can't believe you're struggling with this. It should be easier. Except, yes, this is hard. Sometimes it's one day at a time. Sometimes it's one no at a time, so that you can focus in on what it is that you want to accomplish. Asking for help is hard. Many of us are, like I said, women who have gotten an awful lot done in our lives. And if there's any men that are listening to this call, you might feel exactly the same way. And sometimes admitting that you need help or that you want help, you need collaborations, can be hard. So embrace it. Last, be kind to yourself. Take those baby steps. Celebrate those baby steps. Just don't give up. That's a little girl who's learning how to do steps, going up literal steps, right? Babies learning to walk. They don't give up. They just keep getting up and keep trying. So the other area, I'll stop the share now, but the other area that I think in closing is so important in this particular step, and that is to honor, the fact that you want to create something that is bigger than what you currently have. And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that that's something that I want. That's absolutely something that I want to accomplish in my next chapter. I'm not willing to, just move to Florida and sit with an umbrella drink all afternoon and go to an early dinner. I want to accomplish something more. Honor that. I think life is interesting from the standpoint that some people accomplish it and some people don't. And I always find it so fascinating, why does it work for some and not for others? And I think part of it is that honoring that this is special. I'm going to cherish this. I'm going to take care of this. Now, these are just a few of my suggestions. of how you can close that gap between where you are currently and where you want to be. But I'd love to hear your ideas, and do share, because we're all in this together, my friends. And as easy as it is to imagine what it is that we want and where we want to be and how we want to feel, it is also important that we stop and spend the time to see where we actually are, so that we're not living in the future, that we know the future almost is brought into the present, and we start to recognize, what do I have to change in my current life to close that gap? Your gap plan will probably be the most difficult process up to this point that you've done, of all the different steps to designing your own fabulous next chapter. And part of it is because this step is about doing. You've not only created the plan, the gap plan, I call it, but you're actually doing it. And doing always is harder than dreaming. It truly is. It's something that you have to actually live through and change. But if you feel at all like you're starting to get a little bit slowed down, or questioning whether or not your next chapter is going to be as fantastic as you want it to be, keep returning to your vision board. Go back to step number 2 and just imagine yourself as the woman you want to be, experiencing the next chapter that she wanted to create, because you are on your way. I want to thank you. And if you've enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. YouTube loves thumbs up, right? And please do subscribe if you haven't already. I absolutely love hearing from all of you. A biento.